Hi everybody! Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today I have a layout that I made for a Punched Out Thursday to die for. And in this collaboration, we use punches and dies to create a layout. And the other ladies who are following along with this collaboration are Kathy, Ronnie Sue, Rebecca, Sonia, and Dorothy, and links to their channels will be in the description box. For this layout, I use several dies and 2 punches. You can see the dies that I used off to the left. I used 2 tag dies. I used a rectangular die with stitching around the edge, and then I used that circular die that's at the top of the left-hand side of the screen right now. The punches that I used are a film strip punch, and you could see that I punched out several strips of a film strip, and then I also used a notebook edge punch on a piece of pattern paper. And the paper collection that I'm using today is the Vicki Boutin Storyteller collection. I'm using some Distress Oxide in black soot, and I'm inking the edges of all of the pattern paper on the page. I really didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do with all these elements, but I knew that I wanted to layer them, and I knew that I wanted to keep the layout fairly simple. So I play around with the elements for a little while, trying to decide how I want to position everything. The tag that's off to the left, it's a gold tag. That is from one of the pattern papers. I just cut that out. There was a whole strip of tags on one of the pattern papers. And the photo that I'm using is of our dog Jackson. Jackson is a really sweet boy. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a little while. But I just wanted to scrapbook this picture. I thought that it was super cute. I used all the pieces that I die cut. I used that yellow tag. And then I was thinking that I wanted to add something on the bottom to kind of balance the cluster out. So I got this tag from the ephemera pack from the collection. And of course, I'm also inking that piece with some black soot. And that's going to be my basic composition for this layout. I'm cutting out some fun foam and I'm going to pop up the photo, and the photo is mounted on some white cardstock, and then I also mounted it on some red pattern paper. I didn't really like that black rectangle. I just thought that it didn't really add anything to the layout and might have been a little bit too much black. So I was going to switch it out for a different piece of pattern paper, but then when I flipped the paper over, I really like the pattern on the other side. Now I'm putting some adhesive on the back of my photo, and I want to keep everything exactly where it is, so I'm very careful to glue everything together or attach everything together very carefully. Whenever I have a lot of pieces that are layered on top of each other, I find that it's really hard to reconstruct that exact layering once it's taken apart. Even if I take a photograph, sometimes I can't get the pieces to look exactly the way they did before. So since I'm really happy with the way that this all looks, I want to make sure that I get everything attached down as is. I cut that tag down a little bit since the majority of it was behind the layers anyway. And now I'm putting all those layers on top of that film strip. I wanted to make a hole in the yellow tag, so I used the tool. I don't know what it's called. I've had it in my stash for years, but you can hit it with a hammer and it will make a nice hole in whatever you would like to make a hole in. I wanted to add some photo corners to the layout. One of my favorite things. I used the EK Success Scalloped Photo Corner Punch on this layout, and I punched out 4 photo corners, and then I inked the edges with some of the black soot Distress Oxide, and now I'm attaching them down to the corners of the photo. There were some elements on the chipboard embellishment pack that I wanted to use. There was a banner that you could see I put under the photo. And then there were some really, really tiny little black circles with gold hearts on them. And I thought those would be perfect little embellishments for the photo corners. And I glued those down right away because they're really small. And we all know that chipboard doesn't stick too well. So I wanted to make sure that they were attached down. I'm looking at some of these sentiments. This one says, "Your smile holds so many secrets," and I really loved that sentiment, so I decided that I wanted to use the tab that was on that same chipboard piece, but I didn't want to do anything that was going to ruin the phrase because I really liked that and I was thinking I might use it on the layout. So I cut out that tab and then I attached it down on top of the photo. When I looked at the layout the next day, I was thinking that there wasn't enough of the film strip showing. It just looked a little short, so I cut it in half and I extended it down a little bit on the bottom. I used a We Are Memory Keepers punch, and I punched out some circles to go around the holes on the tags. And I punched them out in a couple of different colors. And I'm again using that tool to make a hole on the orange tag. And then I'm attaching those down. Again, I don't want to lose them. I will often just lay things on top of my layout and then I transfer the layout somewhere else and some of them get lost. And so I'm trying to learn that when I do like something, I should attach it down as soon as possible so it doesn't get lost. There were some very tiny chipboard circles with gold stars on them, and they make quite a journey around the page. Right now I have them to the right of the photo. I fussy cut some banners out from the pattern paper. Right now you could see they're off to the right of the layout. And I put them on the layout. I took them off the layout. They finally end up on the layout, but I put them back on after I was all done with filming the video. The background paper is a piece of white cardstock. It has a smooth finish. I've already gessoed it with some white gesso, and I wanted to do some stamping on the background. I found these Technique Tuesday stamps in my stash. These are one of those things that I just had to have. I was really, really excited to get them, and then I didn't use them. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. I do try to use the materials that I buy, but every once in a while I'll buy something and then I don't use it. So I'm finally using these stamps, and it's a great stamp set. It's all different types of stitching. So I used one type of stitching all the way around the outside, and then when I didn't want it on some parts of the corners, I just used a little piece of cardstock and I masked the area that I didn't want the stitching on. And now I'm using a different stamp and I'm stamping it just a couple of times in two different places on the layout. And then as I was going through my stamps, I found this little set. This is a Studio G set. There was one long stamp in it, and I decided to add that to each of those clusters. And you could tell by the way I did the border, I am not looking to make a perfect stamped layout. I just want to use the stamps to embellish the layout, and I'm not worried if they're perfectly lined up or if all of the stamps come out crisp and clear. I just want to add some texture and some pattern to the background. I'm not sure who manufactured this stamp, but it is a background stamp. It's a series of dots, and I thought that it would look nice to have these dots all around the outside of the large cluster. The Stays on ink that I'm using, it's not dried out, but it's probably not as dark as it once was. So I find that if you leave the stamp on the page a little bit longer, then the image tends to be a little bit darker. Jackson is one of our 3 rescue dogs, and when you get a rescue dog as an adult, they have a past, and unfortunately for Jackson, he clearly had some unfortunate circumstances in his past. When we went to visit him at the rescue, the really lovely people that work there warned us that he was very, very nervous, and they seemed very worried that he wouldn't, perform for us, that he wouldn't show any affection. So he was clearly very scared. They made us all sit down in chairs, and he was very standoffish, but at the very end, they gave us 15 minutes with him. At the very end, he went over to my daughter Julia and he licked her hand, and she just fell in love with him. And he's very afraid of men. He's gotten much, much better, but he would not go near my husband for a really long time. And I'm talking months and months. He was afraid of him. And now that's not the case, but he still retains some scars of whatever has happened to him in the past. But we're so happy that he's part of our family. He's such a loving boy and he's such a mush. And you can't really tell from this picture, but he's very handsome. He's part Rat Terrier, part Jack Russell Terrier, part Fox Terrier, and part Whippet. So getting back to the layout, I'm continuing to add background stamps. I used a mesh stamp on the background, and now I'm using a very small dot stamp. And I'm adding the dots to lots of places, but I'm trying to put the very small dots around the outside border of the large areas of stamping. To me, it just helps to transition the thicker areas of stamping into the background. I did quite a bit of stamping with that small dot stamp, and now I'm going to go into the background with some sprays. So the first spray that I'm using is a Lindy Starburst spray, and that is called Yellow Rose of Texas. And you could see that I'm adding the yellow spray using the packaging technique, and I'm putting it over the areas that I stamped. I also wanted to add some orange to the background, and for the orange I'm using a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist called Orange Soda, and I'm adding that into the same areas where I put the yellow spray. And then I was thinking that I would add another color of yellow, and I'm using again a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist, and this color is called Golden Sun. I just added a touch of that. I think it was very similar to the Yellow Rose of Texas. Now I'm adding another layer of the Lindy's Yellow Rose of Texas to the background. And I do like to add several layers of color, and I do dry the sprays between each application. So now I want to add a little bit of modeling paste to the background. I'm using a Tim Holtz stencil. I believe this is called Dot Fade, and I'm using some Liquitex modeling paste. And this stencil is very subtle, but I like the way it adds a lot of texture to the background. So I'm applying the modeling paste to the areas where I have the stamping and the color. After I lift up the stencil, I like to use the palette knife to make the modeling paste a little irregular along the edges. I don't want the modeling paste edge to be a straight line. I like the way the modeling paste helps to dull down the color in the background a little bit. I sometimes find it challenging to make the backgrounds subtle enough that they don't overpower the pattern papers and the photo. So adding things like modeling paste and what I'm doing now, which is splattering the background with some watered down white acrylic paint, it helps to dull down the background just a little bit. And I forgot to mention that I added some green splatters to the background. I used a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist, and the color is called Forest Deep. I just wanted a touch of another color in the background. And now I'm adding some splatters of watered down black acrylic paint. I like to use both white and black on the same layouts. I usually put a lot more white splatters than black splatters. And then I wanted to add just a hint of a couple of other colors to the background. I don't put down a lot of these colors, but I do put down some Art Anthology Ink Spot is the name of the color on the background to add a little bit of blue to the background. And then I use a red color that is a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist called Red Tulip. So now I am finally calling the background complete. And I'm adding some adhesive to the back of that large cluster. And then I'm going to attach that down to the left side of the layout. I was going to make it straight up and down, but then the cluster got kind of turned a little bit sideways, and I liked the way that that looked. I was just a little unhappy with how bright the yellow was. Of course, I picked a very bright color, but I decided that I was going to put down a layer of heavy gesso, and I'm not brushing the paint on. I'm using a sponge and I'm just dabbing a little bit on. Now I'm adding the title, and I wanted to use black letters for this. I have a couple of sets of letters that I got from a big sale that Felicity Jane had a few months ago. My friend Kim told me about that sale, and I spent a little bit too much money, but I got some really nice things. I love script letters, so I'm combining the script letters with these uppercase letters, and I'm spelling out Sweet Boy. And I do spend a little bit of time off camera arranging the letters just to get them as lined up as I could get them because it takes me a very long time. Now I'm adding those banners back in, and I do take them off again, but like I said, they do end up on the layout. I add some gold hearts to the layout. I have 3 of them. One's under the photo, one's on the blue tag, and one is over the E's in the title. And I also put a dog bone. I think that was a button with the back cut off. I put that underneath the word boy. And I was considering adding some twine to the tags, but then I changed my mind. I decided I was going to add brads to each of those tags. So I found some brads in my stash that were different sizes and different colors, and I used a little red bow on top of that big blue tag. And I wanted to add just a little bit of bling to the layout, just a touch. So I used a green, a red, and a blue jewel, and I put them in the center of those hearts. And then I really wanted to add that sentiment that says, "Your smile holds so many secrets." So I decided that I could put that underneath the photo. So I cut it out, I inked the edges, and I attach it down to the layout. Here are some close-ups of the layout. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope that you will check out the videos of Dorothy, Sonia, Rebecca, Ronnie Sue, and Kathy. The links to their channels will be in the description box, and I hope to see everybody again next Thursday for another A Punched Out Thursday to Die For. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.